So nice to have you all. Nice to have you all here. And hi, Cynthia. Hi, Joss. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, Angela. And hi, Josh. You look different in person, Josh. Josh is our AV person here. And his icon on the screen there doesn't do him justice. There you are, Josh. So there was no mix-up today, hopefully, and we are going to talk about how to find and keep great staff at your studio. So, I'm keen to hear, from each of you, because we're a select group today. Why are you here, and what are you hoping to gain from today? This is your opportunity to volunteer before I call on you. Just unmute and talk away. Can see you're getting ready to say something there, Indy.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm not an employer, but it's really interesting to know as an employee what would attract, you know what I mean, from the other side. So I can't really say from their point of view, but from my point of view, there's a few key things.
Tell me.
Well, salary. Now that I'm fully qualified, I'm not as eager just to accept anything. And environment, I guess, both people and the physical environment, like the cleanliness, the attractiveness of the workplace. Does it feel fresh and inviting?
So,
and the other staff too.
All right, so let's unpack each of those just a little bit. In terms of salary, I mean, let's keep this, steer away from mentioning dollars because we're in Australia and we've got an international audience where an Australian dollar means, less in terms of, but can you talk to us about how your expectation of salary has changed, over the last couple of years maybe?
I think while I was training and still doing my work experience hours, I guess, I was more willing to accept the base rate because I was just so eager to get experience in the field, especially in a country town where there's limited Pilates studios. But I guess now, after listening to a few podcasts and realising that, my education is quite valuable, I just think that you need to put a bit more value on your time so that they value you as well, so they don't just think that you're willing to accept anything.
Tell me about, you said also the team, like your fellow staff. What's important to you there?
Well, usually if I'm going for a job, obviously I will have done some classes at that studio, and I guess I'm looking for approachable, happy definitely. I mean, are they happy in their job? Do they look like they like working there? Friendly, good humour, fun. I mean, the list goes on, but it's not like it's a date. They are your work. But, friendly and approachable and having fun, I guess.
Right, because there's two kind of angles there. One is like you've got to work with these people, so it's like you want nice, friendly, approachable people that are, going to be fun to work with. But the second thing is like, well, they're kind of like your Yelp reviews, right? So if they're all kind of cranky and downtrodden, it's like, well, you're probably not going to enjoy working there, if that's an indicator of the culture.
Yeah, exactly my point. Yeah.
Huh. I wish we could get, deeper into that, in the nitty gritty of the pay question, but because we've got such a broad, spectrum of people who are listening to this from different regions of the country. So some are rural, some are in the city, and we've got people in different countries of the world listening to this. So it's like saying a dollar figure is just going to be basically meaningless, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But all right, so those are your considerations as a potential employee, and I think it's awesome what you say about, like, of course you would go and do classes at a studio, before you consider working there, because then you can understand, some of those things. It's like, okay, well, do the instructors look happy? Is this the place? Is the way that they teach here the way that I teach? Do the clients, seem to enjoy it? Are the classes good? Are the toilets clean? All of that stuff. Who else, wants to share? Why are you here today? What about this topic is of interest to you? Hey, Joss.
Hi. Long time no see. How are you?
Yeah, I'm awesome. Nice to see you.
That's good. Look, I personally don't actually have a studio as of yet. I'm working with a number of people in their own studios. My reason for being online is actually trying to ascertain what makes a good employee, if that makes sense. Because my style might be very different from Indy's and Andrea's and Vicky's, for example. So just curious to know and that's the reason why I'm online, is basically to find out what the secret is for being a good employee.
Great.
Yeah. I
love it. And this is something I'm hoping we've got a few employers on the line today. I know at least a couple of you I see are. But I've been talking to a lot of employers over the last couple of months, and I'll share a few things that I've learned with you before the end of today. Who else wants to chime in? Angela Barr says, "Yeah, me too. From the employee angle, want to understand like what attracts, what employers look for in a great employee."
Hi, Raph. Also, I'm Ange. I just wrote that. Also I don't own a studio, but I do help out a lot, and we are looking for new staff. I guess the process that other people take in feeling out people, because we've had a few doozies who seem beautiful and wonderful, and then once they start taking classes, the feedback from clients is not great. So how you manage that without destroying those poor girls' soul and all of that. So, yeah, just feedback.
Okay, great. Well, you got questions from both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
Who else wants to contribute or has a question or wants to share why you're here? Are there any other employers on the call today? All right, so you guys are all, and I totally get it, because if I'm on a call like this, I'm not sticking my hand up. I just want to, listen to what other people have to say and form my own views. So, if you're feeling like you don't want to contribute, I respect that. And if you're feeling like you want to contribute but you don't want to verbalize, you can just type it in the chat. That's totally fine too. So, well, this is really interesting. This is a topic I think about a lot, and the reason I think about it a lot is because it's kind of like I almost hear the same thing from employers and from prospective, and from instructors who are looking for work, is like how do I find this ideal employee? Where do I find them? I can't get good people. And then the instructors are like, oh, I can't find anywhere to work. Where do I find somewhere great to work? And how do I, find a great place? And so it seems to me that there are kind of two conversations going on that if we could just connect the dots, it would be a lot better for everybody. So I guess where will I start? Well, I think, what I hear from employers, what I've heard a lot from employers lately is that, the probably their number one headache, not probably, definitely the number one headache that I hear from employers is I can't find great staff. Like that is literally the thing that is the biggest pain up the backside for employers. And so what do they mean by great staff? And when we double click on that, I think we see, basically two categories of behaviors. One is fills the reformer studio or the mat studio or the whatever, right? So bums on reformers. At the end of the day, if you hire a plumber to fix your toilet, you want the darn toilet fixed. You don't want a lovely plumber to come and chit chat with you and be friendly and then go and the toilet still doesn't work. You want the frickin' toilet fixed, right? So, and that's the same if you're a studio owner and you're hiring an instructor. Bottom line, end of the day, what are you hiring them for? You're hiring to put bums on reformers. You want people to come to that class and love it so much that they come back next week and next week and next week, right? Because otherwise you don't have a viable business. So I think that is, that can't be overstated. Like that is such a crucial bedrock, thing. And I think, the reason I think it's worth mentioning, even though, many of you are probably thinking like, well, fucking duh, like, super obvious, is that as an employer, because I've been an employer in this industry for a decade, is that, what I hear, and I support this, what you said at the start, Indy, I hear a lot of people saying this, that, my qualification is valuable, my education is valuable. I've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, educating myself and becoming qualified. So now I'm good at what I do, and that's worth something. And I'm a big fan of education. It's my business. I've got a lot of education myself, so I'm with you on that. But I think as an employer, that's not where I see the value of an employee. Like, I've got a team of 35 people, working at Breathe Education, right? Honestly, 34 of them, I don't even know if they've been to university or not. Like I've got no clue, because that's basically got no relevance to whether they're awesome at their job or not, right? So if you come in and you did a weekend Pilates course and you just fill up that studio and with a wait list every week, and the clients love you, right? And everyone's running out going, gee, that was such an awesome class. I'm coming back next week. I've signed up for a year membership, whatever. It's like, I don't care what qualification you've got, but I do care that reformer studio is full every week. So I think the qualification is important, and the learning you've done is important because it enables you, you now have the skills to fill that reformer studio, right? And so that's what I would sell, when you're having a conversation with the employer about, well, this is how much I think I'm worth, right? I think the way to sell that and the way to present that is not like I'm worth this much because I've got X, Y, Z certifications, but I'm worth this much because I'm going to fill your darn reformer studio for you, right? And that's, at the end of the day, that's what you're paying me for. So I think that's thing number one. And I think as an instructor, that's like just, never forget that is your job description, put bums on reformers or bums on mats or bums on Cadillacs or whatever it might be. It doesn't sound terribly controversial to say that, I think. But, so if I was going to ask for a raise, of my boss, I would be looking at looking on Mind Body Online or whatever system the studio's using and thinking like, okay, well, is my average attendance in my classes, has it increased over the last 3 months? And if it has, well, now I'm more valuable because I'm generating more revenue for that studio. Indy Roman says that takes a lot of confidence for a new employee to say, well, yeah, it does. And it's much easier for me to say it because I'm not actually going for a job here. So that's much easier. So how could you, how could you have that conversation? Like, well, number one, if I give you, a Tuesday night class at my studio permanently, what's your level of confidence that 6 weeks in that class is going to be full? Do you feel that, do you guys back yourselves that you can do that? Do you feel confident that you know how to, assuming that I bring us, there are people come to try your class, right? Do you have strategies to get people coming back?
I'd be very interested to hear about potential strategies to get people who are trying it back. We have a new studio that's just started up around here, and I'm one of the original instructors or lead instructor for the Pilates side of things. And so this is where it's really interesting. Like, I know we're talking about our worth and everything else. They have got the mindset that if there's anything less than 4 people in a class, they're just going to cancel it. Mm-hmm. Instead of running the class. And so I see that as controversial for their studio, because obviously people don't know whether their classes are going to be cancelled or not on them. And then the other aspect is that shouldn't there be like the studio receptionist or studio manager who should be following up with those clients that have had the trials? This is where it gets really mucky in terms of a Pilates instructor versus what our job is, which is clearly in the studio to instruct and have the best experience for those clients to come back, versus, the studio manager who should be going out and selling the studio themselves. Does that make sense?
What a great question. And, I agree, it's a shared responsibility, right? So it's not the instructor's sole responsibility to do the marketing for the studio.
Yeah.
100%. Cynthia says it's the before and after chat. Before and after class service for me, making the client feel like they're more than a number on a reformer, and willingness to promote on social media if the studio has an active social media. Yeah, so I think the things that you can do as an instructor are, number one, give a great class. And so, I'm assuming that you know how to do that, and that's about, challenging people and providing layers and making it fun and, a bit interesting but not too wacky. And, if music's a thing where you teach, playing cool music and not always playing the same playlist, day after day after day, and maybe being kind of like making it fun and cracking jokes if you crack jokes, or, just like making it an experience for the clients, that, both a physical experience and a sort of a mental / emotional experience for them, so that they're like, oh, that was awesome, that was fun, right? And it was challenging. So that's one thing. But then there's, like Cynthia says, I think it's not just the before and after, I think it's the during part as well, where it's like that client, having that client feel seen, like you see them there, they're in the room, and you are, you're glad that they're in the room, right? So if I'm a beginner and I show up at your class and I've been screwing up my courage for 3 months because I had a baby 6 months ago, and I'm conscious of my body shape isn't what it used to be, and I've got these daggy leggings that I bought 2 years ago and they don't quite fit properly, and they've got a bit of baby spew on them, but I didn't have time to do the washing. So, and I'm showing up feeling kind of really self-conscious and like, am I in the wrong place here? Am I the only one who's like so out of shape and looks like a dag and all of that stuff? And if the first thing that happens when I walk in the door is Josh walks up to me and goes, hey, you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you came. You're in the right place. I'm going to look after you. I'll be like, oh, that I am in the right place, right? That makes me feel good. And then during the class, if I get a few bits of encouragement like, hey, Raph, you're doing really awesome for your first day. I can't believe you're doing so well. It's your first go. Keep it up. You're going to pick this up really quickly, right? I know it hurts, your legs when we do this. That's normal. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, and just a bit of encouragement and a bit of positive reinforcement. And then at the end, I think, like Cynthia says, I think it's the chit chat, it can be about something just like tangential, like, you know, how's the hubby and kids sort of thing. But I really like, and depending on the schedule at your studio, like some studios have a pretty tight turnaround where you don't have a lot of time for chit chat. So I just, you know, you can blend this in during or towards the end of class. And if teaching a beginner class, like you can actually say it to the whole class, hey, if you had a great time today, okay, if it's your first time, I recommend you come back, you know, if you're on the trial offer, which, you know, most studios do like 5 classes for $50 or something like that for 2 weeks, right? So if you're on the trial offer, you know, I'd love to see you back one more time before the weekend, right? To really create a good habit for yourself. Now, you don't have to come every day. That's not the plan, okay? But I'd love to, you know, today's Tuesday. I'd love to see you back on Thursday or Friday, you know, just to keep the momentum for yourself, because when you're starting a new habit, it's really easy to fall off that habit horse. And so just, you know, creating a manageable plan and strategize with them. You know, you can do it as a group. You don't have to like sit down and do a big talk with one person. And then at the end, you know, as I walk out, if, you know, you just like stand at the door, you know, don't sort of be wiping down the equipment or checking your phone or anything. Stand at the door and make eye contact with every person as they walk out and say by name. And if you say, hey, Raph, it was great to have you in the class today. I really look forward to seeing you again. I hope you can come back before the end of the week. Okay. Man, like I am so sold on coming back at that point. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Sorry, does someone have something you want to contribute there?
I think Ohud wants to say something.
Go ahead, Ohud. Unmute yourself and share what you want to say. In the chat, Ohud says that it is in touch. That's in touch with my job is in a communications consultant. So I'd love to hear anything more you've got to share on that.
Yes. This is the first time I hear this lecture, but I'm trying to learn more about how to be acceptable by the other in the first time, that it is a more problem for me. When I start with any work, I cannot be in touch with the people, maybe different cycle, different faces. I don't know. That's my problem.
So you find it difficult to connect with people?
Yep. They strange people. They may be thinking that I have a proud, different personal. That's all time I face it. That's problem with them. I don't know why.
Well, I guess my feedback or my suggestion there would be, ask someone for feedback. Ask somebody if I would pick somebody that you think will be honest and that will be kind, and send them call them up or send them a text or an email and say, hey, could we chat on the phone for 10 minutes, or could I buy you a cup of tea one time this week? Because I'd really appreciate your feedback. And then just when it's in private and there's, it's a neutral territory, just say, hey, look, I get the impression that, it's difficult, you're finding it difficult to connect with me. And I wonder if you could give me any feedback. Like, is that true? And if so, like, why? And then just listen to their answer and don't be defensive.
So I think that any employee, when they started with the job or new job or when submit application, that should be enough idea and study enough about the job description and what he has to do and what he can get impact for this job. I this is from my experience in the global organization I worked before.
in Pilates, I think that's a really good point, because in Pilates, often there is no job description, or it's there's a job ad sometimes, but it's not it's not very comprehensive, and often it's not very clear. And I can't think of any studio that I've worked at, and there may be many studios I haven't worked at that have this, but where employees, the teaching staff have had really clear KPIs, like this is how your performance will be measured at work. Whereas that is completely normal in most corporate organisations to have those, goals of so the team members know, well, how do I know if I'm winning? And in Pilates studios, like Josh said before, it's okay, well, and Indy said as well, well, how can we tell, what is our job? Is it our job to market the studio, or is it our job to go and, teach a good class, or, how do I know if I'm winning? And I think that's, that is important for the studio owner. And that was one of my points that I wanted to raise today, that if you're a studio owner or an employer and you're looking for staff, well, first get clear on what is the job that you're hiring that person to do. What problem are you paying them to solve? Because at the end of each week, you're going to give them a handful of money. What are you paying for? That, metaphorically, what's the toilet that they're fixing for you? How will you know that they've done a good job, and how will they know they've done a good job? And so I would say some KPIs around that, obviously attendance at your classes, like average utilisation, what percentage of the reform beds or mats or whatever are occupied, would be one. And there are other ones that we also use at Breathe, which can be applicable, things around values. And so that's stuff about, basically, what Indy said at the start, being cheerful and friendly and supportive of each other, and, being keen to learn and grow and giving and receiving feedback, stuff like that. Bonnie says, I'm in a different situation. I've been teaching for a group of studios for a year, and my classes generally are waitlisted. I'm getting requests from private training from new members since they can't get into my classes. Good problem to have, but I'm stretched to my limit. Well, that is a great problem, Bonnie. That is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear anything anyone wants to share on that.
So, hi, this is Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
How are you?
I'm awesome. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. So I'm in a different situation, and I teach in a group of studios for a corporate Pilates business, I guess. I teach in a couple of different locations, and some are 6 and 7 o'clock a.m. and some are evening classes. And we're in a time, I think, in the U.S. where people are embracing Pilates and a busy market.
Yep. All of the studio owners I've talked to in the US have said that there are not enough instructors, and there are, if they had more instructors, they could put on more classes, and they can't service the clients that they have. Yeah,
exactly. And so we're in that situation where we have, we've got a great group of instructors, and we've got great members, and we have the same people that show up for the same classes all the time. And then we have new members because, of course, the studio wants to grow. But then there's some frustration because they can't get into the classes that they want to get into. And so there's more demand, even more than normal, for private training. But there's only so many hours in the day. So I'm not quite sure how to handle that.
The two bits of advice I've got are set up, do a personal offsite where, outside of work time, where you're not rushed or stressed, maybe with your loved one or a good friend, somebody who's got your best interests at heart and will facilitate for you. Design your ideal life. Like how many hours do you work? How much money do you make? What working environment do you have? What sort of clients do you see? What sort of classes do you teach? Do you prefer doing privates or group classes or a combination? And get clear on that. And, it may turn out that you want to work 3 days a week or 5 hours a day or 50 hours a week. And whatever you choose is fine. But then design your schedule around that. So rather than sort of being reactive about, okay, I've got all these clients wanting sessions and sort of feeling obligated to say yes, first, set it out and say, okay, I'm going to only work this number of hours per week, right? And I want a certain percentage of that to be group sessions and a certain percentage to be one-on-ones, or whatever you decide, and then work to that. And the second thing is to think about your income, your how much money you want to make. And if that's not important to you at all, well, you don't have to go through this step. But, for most of us, it's kind of important. And think, again, don't worry about, I would start from a clean slate and not worry about, okay, how much you're currently making and how much you think you can make, or what you think is fair or anything like that. Just think, okay, magic wand, in my perfect world, if I'm, I would like to teach this many classes and I would like to make this much money. Okay, and then we work back from there to figure out how to make that happen rather than starting from what you've got and then trying to shoehorn it into, make it fit into, what works for you. So, and it may be that if you figure out that, I want to make this much money and I only want to teach this many classes. So therefore, well, what if I, taught this many group classes and then I taught privates and I put my prices up for the privates, or maybe I did duets, which pay a bit more, so you can actually engineer it, reverse engineer it based on what you want.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of the direction that I'm headed. I just need to decide what the right mix is in terms of private training versus the group classes, because it's different to prepare for. So you have to account for the amount of time it takes to prepare for those private clients versus a group class. And so I guess that's the whole thing is the financial end of it, and then deciding how much time do I want to spend on an average week, and then decide which mix gives me the best opportunity to do that. So thank you for that. Yeah,
no problem. And, and you can also, and I don't know how much you're being paid, obviously, but, there may be room for you to renegotiate your pay for the group classes. I mean, if your classes are consistently waitlisted, well, there's a fairly basic sort of bit of math that you can do that will tell you whether there's any room for your remuneration to improve there. And, this is a super rough rule of thumb, but as a general rule, wages should be roughly 1/3 of, revenue in a given business. So, if you're if you're generating $100 of revenue in that class, like just say you've got 5 people in the class and they're paying $20 each, well, that's $100 of revenue. Well, you should expect as an instructor to capture a maximum of about 1/3 of that, so in this case, $33. So if you can sort of, do some basic math and think about that and figure out whether there's any room, like if you were capturing 50% of it, well, that's probably not a very good business plan for the studio owner and they're probably going to go bankrupt. But if you're only capturing 20% of it, well, maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room for you to to ask for a little bit more, given your high level of performance.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Cynthia says, OMG. Is there a KPI beyond sheer numbers that we can negotiate with our boss? Class numbers aren't the best indicator if you're the one who is running the 5 a.m. classes that will always have the highest cancel rate. 100%. So this is a really big issue in telling who are your best instructors. It's like, okay, well, my classes are always full. Yeah, but you teach like the most popular class of the week, where if we put my cat teaching the class, it would be full, Whereas then somebody else is like, oh, they've only got 3 people in the class, but yeah, they're teaching 5 a.m. on a Sunday, So of course no one's going to come to that class. So we're not comparing apples with apples. And so how can we then say, oh, well, you get you get a pay raise for having a full class when it's like, well, that's Monday 6 p.m. Of course it's full, and so, yeah, there are other KPIs. But first and foremost, I think as a studio owner or as a person writing the roster, you need to create a roster so that someone's not teaching all the good classes and someone else isn't teaching all the dud classes, right? So if I'm teaching all of the 5 a.m. classes, you can't measure my performance, right, against someone else who's teaching all of the peak time classes. So if I'm teaching some peak time and some off peak and whatever, then we can, on average, we can look at, my performance versus a different instructor's performance. So that's one thing. I think it's to do with the design of the schedule and the mix of classes each person gets. But then there are several other KPIs I would suggest for instructors. Okay, one is to do with subs, right? So covers in Australia. So basically, as an instructor, I mean, we all know, right? I mean, just imagine, like, we all know that when we sub someone else, right? So if Indy normally teaches the class and then Indy's sick one day and I teach the class, we know I'm not going to pull as many people as Indy pulls, right? Because those people come for Indy week after week after week after week, and then they get the email going, oh, sorry, Indy's sick today, you've got Raph. And they're like, well, who the hell's Raph? And why would I come to Raph's class? I'm going to take the night off and have a glass of wine with my husband instead, and I'll come back next week when it's Indy, right? So we know that when Indy takes the night off, we make less money as a studio, right? So if we find out that Indy, every week takes 3 sessions off, right? Well, then 3 months later, we're looking, we're going, oh, look at all the money we've lost because Indy likes to, have a glass of wine with her husband every, Thursday. and so that makes Indy a less valuable employee, right? Because her classes are less full because she's not there teaching them all the time. But so if Indy's always present, right, and never asks for subs, right, unless she's got COVID-like symptoms, of course, then that's a high value. So I would actually put a number of subs that somebody asks for as a KPI, right? I would have that as a KPI. And then there's the flip side of it. Okay, if we need a sub, does Indy put her hand up to come in and do that, right? And because anyone who's ever managed a studio will know, like, that is one of the biggest, panic-stricken headache moments you can have is when you've got a full waitlisted class and 1 hour before class, Raph calls up who's teaching the class and says, I'm sorry, I got locked out of my apartment, I can't come in or whatever, right? And you're like, shit. What? How am I going to? I just need someone with a pulse to teach this class right now. And if I ring up Indy and Indy's like, I'll do it, I'm like, oh, thank the Lord, right? Or more properly, thank Indy, right? And Indy suddenly is my best friend and I love Indy as an employee. So I would have that as a KPI of, like, what percentage of times that, if I asked you to sub 10 times, how many of those 10 times did you say yes, right? And I would put some number next to that of, like, okay, we expect you to say yes 6 out of 10 times, right? Because maybe, okay, I call up Indy, maybe her kid's got a broken leg and she genuinely can't do the sub, right? But maybe she's got some plans, but she could cancel them and she could come and do the sub, right? And then she gets points, and I think that's a good KPI. Next one is I would have like basically, like I said before, values, right? So, in Breathe we have values like we face challenge with optimism is a value that we have, right? Which is like, okay, when things are kind of shitty, we don't, sit and mope. We cheerfully look for a solution, right? We try and fix it, okay? And I'm not saying that has to be your value, but that's our value. And so we actually have behaviors that we say are associated with that. It's like, okay, here's what facing challenge with optimism looks like. Here are the behaviors that we see when someone does that. And here are the behaviors that we see that are like the needs improvement in the facing challenge with optimism. Let me see if I can bring up a couple of them. I might have been able to do something really crazy here and share my screen. So they're kind of small for you to read, but I'll read them out for you. So we have, all right, so we have this value here. We have the value down the left side, okay? And then here are the behaviors that we see when someone's embodying that value. And then here are the behaviors that we see that tell us someone needs to work on that value, right? And we've got 7 values. You don't have to have 7. You could have 3 or 4 or 5, whatever number. But, 7 is probably a maximum. If you've got 58 values, it's probably too many for people to remember. So we have this one here, we face challenge with optimism. Okay, we face challenge with optimism. Let's make this a bit bigger. We face challenge with optimism. All right, so it says here are the behaviors, has an internal locus of control. So basically feels like, okay, this is kind of a crappy situation, but I've got the ability to change it, right? So I'm going to make a difference here. Improvises, adapts, overcomes, makes it happen, right? So rather than giving me reasons why you couldn't do it, give me crazy ideas about how we might do it. Remains cheerful is another behavior. Acknowledges the reality of the situation, but remains optimistic and focuses on generating solutions. Okay, this is crappy, but we'll figure it out. Now let's start figuring. Sees a problem as an opportunity. And then the behaviors that we would see that would tell us that that person's not meeting that KPI for that value would be passive-aggressive language. Oh, it's so great that you couldn't teach Thursday night, Indy, because that gave me opportunity to pick up some extra income, instead of going to my child's birthday party. External locus of control. Like, I don't have control over the situation. It's not within my power. Problem-focused rather than solution-focused. Catastrophizing, so like saying like, oh no, the sky's falling. Victim mentality for self or others. So those are behaviors that we have. And so basically, we have a value. We face challenge with optimism. And then we have like, okay, here's the things that we see you do that tell us whether you're doing that or not. And that is something that we use at Breathe as one of our KPIs for all of our team members, whether they're trainers or student success or whatever. And so everybody has that. And we place equal weight on performance as we do on the values, embodiment. So in a studio situation, the performance is going to be bums on reformers, obviously, given that you've got a fair timetable where people have even, good classes and 5 a.m. classes. But then also you've got the values, like how many subs did you ask for? How many subs did you say yes to? Were you cheerful? Were you friendly? Were you, were you on time? Did you finish on time? Or we could have KPIs around any of those things. And I know the things that employers tell me a lot that they really value is employees who are invested in the culture of the studio. They're not just guns for hire. They're not just like, oh, my job is just to waltz in 5 seconds before the class, teach a class, and then waltz out again, right? It's people who care about the studio and care about the clients and think about the culture. Josh says, do you think then that we should be implementing corporate KPIs to the studio? Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I would take out the word corporate, but I think we should be implementing KPIs. And the KPIs just means like, well, how do you know that person did a good job, right? And how do they know they did a good job? And ultimately, back to the topic of today's discussion, which was ostensibly how to find and keep great staff, right? Well, how do I know if you're a great staff if I don't even know what I'm paying you to do, right? So if I'm an employer and I'm, having a job interview and MJ's interviewing for a position at my studio, right? Well, MJ wants to know, like, well, how will I know if I've done a good job? Like, where are the goalposts in this job? Okay. And so if we have a conversation, if it says it in the job ad, like, okay, we're looking for an instructor who can consistently, get 80% of their classes full, right? And we're looking for somebody who's got these values and embodies these values, right? And here are the behaviors that embody those values. And we take this really seriously, and this is what we stand for, right? And MJ reads that and she looks at it and goes, you know what? I don't really agree with some of those values, so I'm not going to apply for that job, right? Or she looks at it and she goes, oh, that's exactly my values, right? that's a place I want to work, right? And that way you filter out the people who aren't going to be a good fit, and you filter in the people who are going to be a good fit, right? And then at the end of each, 3 months, like we do quarterly reviews, and so maybe at your studio you can do quarterly reviews. MJ and her manager will sit down, okay, and they'll, in private and discuss, okay, MJ, over the last 3 months, your KPIs were number 1, get 80% utilization in your classes. So how'd you go on that? Number 2, do no more, ask for no more than X number of subs. How'd you go on that? Number 3, say yes to at least 60% of subs. How'd you go on that? Number 4, be cheerful and optimistic. How'd you go on that? So we can just actually measure these behaviors, and then we can give MJ feedback and go, hey, you're doing awesome on the class attendance, but I need you to say yes to more subs. It's just like, hey, here's what we agreed was the plan, and here's what you did. And that's good for everyone, because everyone knows where they stand. What do you guys think about that? Does that sound too corporate to you?
No, it sounds really good. I was just curious to know, really, how many studios are implementing things like this, or is it quite rare?
I couldn't tell you right now.
Fair enough.
Anyone on the call have anything like that at work?
Because we don't at all. It's all about attendees. Like I'm not doing my job if the attendees aren't there. But, like we were talking about, you can have the really terrible times, and, people aren't going to come to those ones anyway.
Right. And then you can also have the brilliant jerk, right? Someone who's got great attendance, but they're terrible to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you don't want that person at your studio either. So you've got to have some way of measuring that, and I think this is a pretty good way.
No, I completely agree.
So, if you're in a situation, a couple of you said you're in a situation where you're you're employing people, whether you're the studio manager or owner or whatever, I suggest go away with your studio ownership team and figure out what your values are. So these are things like, don't like think up aspirational things, but actually think like you already have values. We all already have values. You just have to be able to articulate what they are, right? So you've got a value around optimism. Either you don't think it's that important or you think it's really important. Okay, so you've got some value there. So like, what are the things that you think, or the studio owners think are really important in the work context? Who do you want to work with? What sort of people do you want to be around? And those are your values. And then you've got to whittle it down to no more than 7, because if you've got too many, no one can remember them. So salary expectations. It's interesting. A couple of employers I've talked to recently, I've asked them, like, what's your strategy for looking for staff? And they said, I just throw an ad up on Indeed.com, which is basically in the US, that's in Australia would be the equivalent would be, say, Seek.com. It's just an employment website. And then I sort of just hope that I get applicants. And I think there's a lot better ways that you could do it. I'm a fan of using job websites, but I think there are better ways that you can add. And I think that as an employee, as a potential employee, well, isn't that awesome that if these employers are so desperate, they need staff and they don't really know how to find those staff, all they do is throw a job ad up on Indeed along with the other 50 job ads that are already there. Well, that leaves a lot of room for you to be creative and make yourself visible to those employers, that are not just applying for the job ad on Indeed, right? So, do apply for the job ad if you want the job. But for instance, if you walked into the studio, did a bunch of classes, and then after class one time said, hey, by the way, wanted to introduce myself. I freaking love it here, and I'm applying for that job, right? They're going to remember you, I guarantee it, way more than the other 20 applicants that they've just got a Word document resume from. Or, I mean, you could show them that you are you're not just looking for a job, that you want to work at that studio. That's like, I can't think of a different analogy at the moment. It's like, so I apologize. It's like an aphrodisiac for employers, right? If as an employer, you come to me and say, dear sir / madam, I heretofore submit my curriculum vitae for your perusal, and it seems obvious to me that you've just sent, spammed out the same, email application to 100 different employers, okay, that goes straight in the bin, right? But if you send me an email that says, hey, Raph, you don't know me, but I'm a big fan, right? And I love your studio, and I love such and such a person's class, and I love such and such a person's class. And, you might have noticed me. I'm always sitting there in the corner in my yellow leggings, whatever it might be, and anyway, I've always been such a fan. I never thought I could work in such a great place as your studio, but now recently I've been thinking, what, maybe I could. So I'd really like to work for you. And I wonder if we could have a conversation about that. Like, that is going to get you noticed, right? But hi, comma, no salutation, no name, I'm looking for a job. I'm a qualified Pilates instructor. My email address is such and such, that's not going to get you noticed. Cynthia said, someone once told me to interview the studio by going to classes as a client to see if you even want to work there. Was a very eye-opening. A studio owner yelled at me for putting my bag in the wrong spot, despite me being there for the first time. Definitely it didn't apply after that. Yeah, well, looks like you saved yourself a lot of heartache there, Cynthia, by discovering that red flag. Yeah, I think that is such a great piece of advice, is do classes at the studio. Do classes at the studio. I can see a bunch of you nodding, so I'm hoping that's going to be part of your strategy. And I've talked to a lot of studio owners who've said that they, well preference people who are current clients, applying. They would much rather hire someone who's a client than someone who's never been a client. Because if you've paid money to attend classes at that studio, shows that you buy into the vision, you like the product, plus also you get to audition them. Was funny because, this was supposed to be about how to find staff, but really it was, you guys are all on the other side of the equation mostly, right? This is a conversation about how the staff can find employment.
So how would you find staff then, Raph?
Well, I would, if I was a studio owner, I would look in two places. I would look in the front row of my reformer class. Okay, I would say, gee, Joss has been here every week for the last year. She must really love it here. I know she loves it here because she brings her friends and all of that. And I might just tap you on the shoulder after class one day, go, hey, Joss, have you ever considered becoming an instructor? So that would be the number one place I would start, because I believe you can train skills. It's much easier to train skills than it is to train attitude. And I know if Joss has already paid her own money to come here and be a part of this, for a year, she's got a fantastic attitude. And so all she needs is a few skills. And the second place I would look would be in my network. So I would make a little face-to-phone video, just pick up my phone, bam, and I would just be like, hey, everyone, at XYZ Studio, we're looking for a new instructor. Now, we're not looking for just anyone, okay? The person we're looking for believes this value and this value and this value and this value, okay? And they're more, and, really importantly, they can fill a reformer class, right? Because they're going to teach it fun, challenging, interesting class. They're going to pay attention to our clients and remember their names and their dogs' names and their kids' names, and which reformer is their favorite and why they don't like doing the roll up and all of that stuff. Okay. And they're going to care. They're not just going to rock up and be a gun for hire and like, hey, everyone, I'm an awesome instructor and you just got to pay me money and I don't have to do anything apart from just teach a class. And, they're going to come in, and if they see a bit of dirt on the floor, they're going to pick it up. And if they see a client struggling to sign themselves in, they're going to help the client, And that if we need a sub, they're going to say yes, unless they've got a broken leg, right? That's the person we're looking for. And now, if that's not you, that's fine. But if that's you, or if that's someone send me an email. My links, my email's in the link, right? Just a little 5-minute video. Actually, I wouldn't say send an email. I would say send me a video of you, no more than 5 minutes, just face to phone, just like this. No points for cinematography, but just tell me, in 5 minutes or less, why you want to work at our studio. Right? And that way, 80% of people won't send you a video, so they get crossed off the list straight away, because if they're not prepared to go to that trouble, it's like, okay, well, they don't care that much. And the ones that send you a video, like within 30 seconds of starting watching someone's video, you're like, oh, this person's cool. Or you're like, yeah, nah, not going to be a good fit, I think. You really get a good sense about people pretty quickly from a video, and that saves you having to interview, dozens and dozens of people who, aren't a good fit, and saves them the trouble as well, right? And then, of course, the ones that you like, you would audition them, right? You have to have them in to teach a class to you and a couple of staff members. And if the ones that you like the audition, I would then give them audition in front of clients, right? So they've passed the video test, the values fit, okay? They've passed the audition test for staff. And now I would say, okay, well, do you want to come in and teach the XYZ, Monday, 4 p.m. class or whatever? We'll pay you, okay? And it's a paid audition. And then you have some feedback forms. And the clients, come out at the end of the class, and you've got you and a receptionist and your husband or someone standing there pouncing on all the clients going, hey, don't walk out the door, fill out this feedback form because we just had a sub teacher in. I want to know, should we get this person back or not? It's your class. You tell me, do you want them back? Right? And you just got some questions like scale of 1 to 5, how awesome was that class? Scale of 1 to 5, how likely would you be to book into this person's classes if they were on other spots in the timetable? What feedback do you have? What was awesome? What could be improved for next time? Right? And then, all right, if the clients say, yeah, it was awesome, I'd come back. And then you look at what can be improved for next time. The last test is you give the person that feedback, right? So you say, hey, Joss, here's the feedback from the clients. Have a look at it. And if Joss goes, they said I could, play the music a bit softer next time. Okay, that's noted, right? I'm like, Joss knows how to take feedback, right? So Joss gets the job in that situation. So that would be my approach. I'd look in the front row of my reformer sessions, and I would just look on my own personal, Facebook, Instagram, my own network, right? Because people I know are going to be more likely to be like-minded. If I didn't find any success there, I would go to places like, Facebook groups, Pilates subs, Milwaukee or Melbourne or Florida or whatever, and just go, hey, here's my video with my job ad. Just the same video I recorded. So I think that's all we've got time for. I thank you all for your questions, your input, your smiles and nods. And if you're listening to this after and you've got a question or something you'd like to add, just add it into the comments below. I'll respond to you. I hope you have an awesome week.